I am Bill Brown, the Executive Director for Prison Yoga Project, coming to you from the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. And I'm joined by Danny Castro, who's somebody that I know through my work on Echo Yard at Donovan State Prison, as well as I know him through our operations manager, Priscilla Castro, his sister. So welcome, Danny. Welcome, Priscilla. We didn't have the recording rolling while we were doing our centering. So unfortunately, we won't have that for today's podcast. But I want to open this up and allow Danny to read a personal statement, and then we'll hop into a conversation. We're going to invite Priscilla back and then open things up for Q&A towards the end of the program. So, Danny, welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Chris. Should I just jump into this little thing? So Bill and Pris asked me to share a little bio. I'm 40 years old, so I didn't know where to start. It's always funny kind of trying to define oneself. Especially, I'll get into this a little bit later, but I got a master's degree in philosophy while I was in prison. And once you get into philosophy, everything gets more confusing. So the question of who are you is like, I don't know. But that's the answer you get after a master's of philosophy. So I'll just read this. And this is kind of what came to my head when asked who I was. And Bill mentioned it almost sounds like a statement of the sort. So my name is Danny Castro, and I'm from San Diego, born and raised. And early on, my identity was defined by my family's involvement in church. That's all I knew from my first memories. So I was a Christian, is who I would say I would have said, that would have been my my answer as to who I was or something. But on top of that, I was always a very curious kid since my first memories, always questioning everything. So my curiosity took me deeper and deeper into the question of whether God exists or not, because this was central to my identity. This quickly led me to a lot of interest in physics and philosophy of consciousness in high school starting. And I was confronted with insurmountable mysteries that right away I found out even the leading scientists, mathematicians, physicists, and philosophers at every university in the whole world, from the best to the worst, could not answer, these mysteries. And so even more so, those sort of mysteries informed an attitude and posture of humility since back then. So even back then, I was kind of starting to lose the power of Christianity or organized religion over me. Started losing a little bit of its power. But so in my 20s, these are just things that define me, I guess. In my 20s, I experienced my first panic attack. I didn't start drinking till I was 21. So drinking, panic attacks, religion, these things define me. And I had used to drink like a beer every once a week or less. I wouldn't think about it. But in my early 20s, I had a panic attack. And I'd wake up every morning with fear and panic. Couldn't get out of bed. Couldn't drive anywhere, couldn't go to school. I'd just be sweating buckets and, making fists and walking around. So I'd just go back home and wait to get tired to go to sleep. And so I started medicating with alcohol, 6 a.m. until blackout around noon. That was starting around, early 20s. And dark time with many moments of, fear and panic. And so anyways, all the way till the age of 32, I went to prison for drinking and driving. And in prison, there's a lot of alcohol and drugs. So kept drinking in there. Finally got sober a year and a half into prison. And that's when I started taking a lot of school in there. I already had a bachelor's before going to prison, and I was in a master's program. But in prison, I got another BA in sociology and a master's in philosophy. And this informed a political shift from extreme right wing to progressive, sort of Bernie Sanders type politics. Also very big in my identity, because I remember in 6th grade, I was already kind of calling myself a conservative or something. So been sober now over 7 years. This very big part of my identity. And I'm someone who understands the politically left and the right personally, from, personal experience. Same as somebody that might call themselves an atheist or a theist or anything in between. I can relate. And I'm someone that knows that people can change. And that was a big question I always had for people in prison after they do 20 years, and I'd see them on their way out of the gate going home or somewhere. I'd say, hey man, before you go, what's the biggest thing you learned from prison? And a lot of them said that people can change, and their answer was based on themselves, how they had changed. So that's big part of my identity. And I'm someone that knows that the most broken people are not those in prison. It's easy for us out here to look in there and imagine that, all our most broken citizens are the ones that are in there. But I would say that the most broken are those that don't recognize that we're all each other's keepers. Someone that thinks they're not responsible in any way for the people that are in there are probably more broken than the ones that are actually in there. That's my opinion there. And I'm someone that recognizes all the mystery around us and is humbled by its suffering and beauty at the same time. I think suffering has produced the greatest beauty in my life, which is really hard to admit, because I don't want any more suffering in my life. Yet I know that if there's any beauty to my life, a great part of that was because I suffered there. And so there's that tension. And, I love people more because of the suffering that I feel I've experienced. I don't think I used to love people as much as I used to. I mean, I love people more now than I used to. So although the church informed a lot of the hate in my life, I also try to be fair, and I don't see that in the teachings of Jesus, Gandhi, or Martin Luther King Jr., who didn't necessarily reject a lot of the teachings of Jesus. So I try to be fair to that, and how unfortunate it is that a lot of the nonviolence taught by Jesus is twisted into hate politics. So finally, part of my identity, I am someone that has a lot of hope for the future when I feel that, the things, all the hate and all the suffering can be reconciled. That's the only place it can be reconciled is in the future. And so that inspires and informs a sort of hope in me. I don't let myself just live in bitterness or hopelessness, or, when I get depressed, which is often. And I hope that all the suffering can be resolved into love and understanding. And that's why I don't get happy when I see people get life sentences, even the ex cops or something that may have killed people, or even recently I don't know how to pronounce his name, but the guy that was killed while he was jogging, Arbery, I think. The three guys, 2 of them got life sentences, 1 got 35 years. I'm not happy about that. Not because I want something worse to happen to them, but just because I want something meaningful to happen to them. instead of just the same old system. Um, you know, so now just on a regular level, I spend my time making movies, still studying philosophy on my free time, and meditating. And to me, that's like praying to the universe, praying to any sort of consciousness that I can tap into throughout space and time. And, whether that means I'm just praying to all of us or to myself or to God or aliens, it's all whatever it ends up being in the end, all those mysteries I was talking about, who knows? Thanks, Bill.
Yeah. I guess the thing that stands out, and I mean, you mentioned it yourself, that the question that you had for guys as you'd see them exiting the prison is, what, people can change, that this is the, one of the things you're taking away from that. And I'm wondering, you mentioned, that, I mean, basically alcohol that led to your incarceration ultimately. And that when you first got into prison, there was still alcohol and drugs available. Can you talk a little bit about, that aspect, that it's still freely available there, and maybe, yeah.
And I think it's important to reiterate or underscore how important that simple concept is of people can change, because I think that's why we treat a lot of people the way we treat them. And unfortunately, what that means is if we don't hold the hope that other people can change, we have no right to hold the hope that we can change. And I think every single person knows how they've changed in any given way throughout their whole lives, whether they've changed since they were in high school to now, since they were in elementary to high school. Everybody changes. So there's always a hope that it can be for, I don't want to say better or worse, but at least toward a place where you hurt others less, which, it would be the important part of it here in this context. So, yeah, I was always curious, you see someone leaving after 20 years, and I only did 5.5, 6 years in prison. And so you want to know, hey, before you leave, what's the biggest thing after 20 years in prison, man? And so many of them just said change, And so, I remember getting to county jail, which is this place up on a hill in San Diego called George Bailey County.
Yeah.
So when you're arrested and you're still going to court and stuff, you are waiting in something called a county jail versus a state prison. And they're very small. They look like barracks, if you can imagine a military barracks, 36 bunks per bunch of pods, and no yard or anything like that. So you could be there for years if court is taking that long. I was there for maybe 9 months. That's pretty much pure hell. So there's a little bit less of a chance for people to make alcohol because the monitoring and the space is very limited. It's very small with a lot of monitoring. But even there is where I had my first taste of, prison wine, as they call it. Very simple process. They just, as long as you grab one piece of fruit and you can hold on to it for a couple weeks in a plastic bag, you kind of keep it warm and it ferments and it turns bubbly and weird. And it becomes this little pulp that has active alcohol making bacteria. And once you have that, they call that the kicker. And so that's a valuable thing in there for guys to have, because that thing is the catalyst to make alcohol within 3 or 4 days. But you do need that little batch, that little pulpy batch that you always separate after you make your alcohol, and you keep it separate. So one time these guys were telling me they were making alcohol. I didn't believe them. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get drunk and here that'd be heaven. In my mind back then as an alcoholic. Next thing you know, they gave me a cup, a little cup this big, little state cups that they give you. And I drank it fast, and I was legitimately buzzed slash, feeling good, drunk. And that was in county. When I ended up in state prison, there it's just by the gallons. Literally, this guy would have a 5-gallon bucket. You're allowed to have these buckets to wash your clothes in your cell. You just kind of dunking your clothes and stuff. And this guy instead would have, all the fruit from breakfast that they hand out every breakfast. You get an orange, apple, and he would just grind them down and make gallons. He would stand like where people are walking by, asking them if he can have their fruit, and everybody knew what he was up to. The cops aren't paying attention; they don't care for the most part. So he would have like 50, 60, 70 pieces of fruit. Madrone Hall in Chino, it's 200 people. So imagine every breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're getting fruit. This guy's, got bags and trash bags full of fruit. So I bought this guy a cell phone because, my parents there's ways to have money on your account, and you ask your parents over a phone call or a letter to give somebody $300, and then they smuggle in a cell phone. And because I did that, this guy was giving me endless free alcohol that he was making in there. And so I would have lots of cups, these giant jars, like 3 at a time, where if you drank half of one, you'd get pretty good, pretty drunk, pretty regularly for weeks and months, until one day, I don't know what it was, but I was pretty near blackout drunk in my cell. And I was in a place, it's called GP versus protective custody. There's 2 big designations, general population and PC. PC or SNY, same thing. That's where ex-cops go to prison, or gang dropouts, or people with sensitive crimes, meaning people that abuse children in some way, or they're separated into their own prison yards, because otherwise in the GP they'll get stabbed, because in the GP that's where all the gang politics are, gang members, people like me that had, quote unquote, normal crimes that aren't going to get stabbed for the nature of the crime.
Right.
So, I was just drinking, and then some of the homies, some of the gang member guys came by. They would always see me drunk. They didn't mind, that's what everybody's doing, but they were selling some, I guess it was meth or cocaine or something. I don't know what it was. I was near blacked out. And my cellmate wanted some. And since I had money on my accounts, I ordered $70 worth, whatever that means. I don't know. The amounts is, I don't know what that translates into. But I remember doing a line off of the toilet. I mean, there's nowhere to do drugs or anything in there. You just clean the toilet and put the line there. And I'd never done meth or cocaine, whatever it was. And it was about an 8-hour panic attack. But if people know, then I don't have to explain it, but for those that don't know what a panic attack feels like, it feels like when someone scares you, jumps up behind you, hey, and they scare you on purpose, and you have that moment of fear reaction because you don't know what it is. It's that exact piece of fear, but it doesn't stop for hours. So it was pure hell. And finally, the nurses came, and I just played it off and said it was a PTSD panic attack, as opposed to this drug thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it, man. It was so undiluted hell. This it's no surprise that a lot of people that get there kill themselves, because it's an unsustainable experience. And I got lucky because after 8 hours, they had called the nurses, and for whatever reason, it took 8 hours for them to get to my cell, or to where the cops had me walking in circles. And they gave me some Ativan, which is like Xanax or something. And I was just so grateful that I couldn't even dream of drinking after that. And so I did the rest of my 4 years or whatever at that point, 3.5 sober, despite all the drugs and pills and alcohol that's really flowing. There were moments I was tempted, but man, that one experience, I knew that if I drank again, there was the chance that I would get drunk enough to do another drug that might land me in that same pure, panic.
Yeah.
Where you really just need it to end. You need that feeling to end.
Yeah. What support so at this point, this is a level 4 yard, so the highest security level of security.
Right.
What support did you have for getting sober and staying sober?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. When you get to county as someone that hasn't been in and out of prison their whole lives, so you're like an adult, right? And you get into county jail, and I'd been in county jails, but for only 4 to 8 hour drunk tanks. It wasn't, I'd never been in for any. That's common. Anybody can go to a drunk tank after a night of partying or something. But when you get to there for an extent, you're there for days, weeks, months, and stuff. You quickly realize that all you have is each other. You don't have cops. You don't have support. You don't have groups. You don't have people visiting. You have your immediate buddies that are other quote unquote, criminals that are in there for different crimes. Could be someone, accused of murdering, raping, molesting, drugs, assault, accidents, it could be any kind of person. And you meet so many people and you realize right away, this is all you're going to get, especially on those level 4s. Like you're saying, there's not much extra. Sometimes there's no TVs, there's no newspapers, there's always books. But anyways, so yeah, I was drinking and stuff. And the only support, I was accidentally put on a level 4. I don't really know why. I mean, there's so much that happens in there that there's just no reason. And the crazy thing is that if I would have heard these stories before I ever went to prison, I wouldn't have believed someone talking the way I'm talking now. I would have said, well, there's cops. You could have spoken to the cops and gotten your issue, resolved. Or if you're in there, you deserve it. And so you really shouldn't be even talking about it or complaining. Mm-hmm. And so I get sober out of pure survival mode. And like you're saying, on these level 4s, it was more like the hole. And the hole, the levels of prison are 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is the hardest. That's if you're in there for the most violent crimes, or if you work your way up there by fighting nonstop. So you can start on a level 1, but if you're just fighting and doing drugs, and you get to a level 2 and 3, and they keep bumping you up to level 4. Above a level 4 is something called a level 4 180. And that just means the yard is even more secure. Mm-hmm. That's where I was, even though I was, in there for drinking and driving. And then above that is death row. And then above that would be just the hole straight up. You never get out of the hole, which is similar to death row. But death row is worse because it is the hole plus, you're waiting to be executed. So I was more in the hole because that's what reception is while you wait to be moved to a prison. And then I was moved to a level 4.
Right.
And you're only supposed to be in reception for 2 months max. I was there for 9 months. So that's like being in the hole 9 months. Then the level 4 is just almost just as bad. And so you don't have any support, Bill, other than the guys that I just mentioned that you meet when you first get there.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, everybody's looking out for everybody for the most part. There's very few guys that are just immediately going to be the predators, even on level 4s, even in the GP. So, I'm in the GP area. You would imagine that's where the hardest and the toughest guys are. And it's true, but they're not there to immediately start trying to take advantage of people or abuse people, because we're all in the same boat. So if they see you're trying to stay sober, they respect that, and they let you hang out with the other guys that are trying to stay sober. If you're trying to gangbang, then you click up with your race or your gang, and you do that. If you want to get fucked up and do that, then they let you do that with the guys that are all getting fucked up. And if you don't get in trouble and people aren't trying to stab you over debts and stuff, then you could just continue that lifestyle. So I just clicked up with the people that were talking about sobriety and clinging onto it for different reasons, but all of us were clinging onto it to not die. So, and then from there, it's because, they have kids or families, or they can't wait to get out, or they have bigger hopes for their lives. And we would bond around that. That's the support we had, Bill, at level 4. We didn't have any support as far as the institution or anything like that. Like, there was no AA. You could see the psychiatrist if you put in a bunch of fucking paperwork, but like if you want a therapy or want to see a doctor or you want to see a psychiatrist a little more often, you have to put in a lot of paperwork. But even then, if you see them 3 times in a row, meaning once every 3 weeks, which is like the fastest, even the doctor will say, hey, if you feel better, you can just not ask to come in. Because everybody's trying to get in. So even they feel a little bit of like, hey, if you don't really need this, don't ask for it. And unfortunately, everybody needs it. Yeah. Even, like I said, the most broken people are not the ones in prison. So if we need it in prison, I think everybody needs it.
So as you're getting sober, it sounds like you were using, the alcohol as a way of managing your panic attacks.
Yeah.
So how did you develop different coping strategies for working with your panic attacks and anxiety without the alcohol?
At first it was pure force of will and not a good time. So there was nothing to replace it immediately. So, because there was only like 2 options, right? It was like keep drinking and feel a little better here and there, but really a gigantic risk. Yeah. And not even a risk, like a full guarantee that when I'm not drinking, it's going to be pretty bad. Plus the risk of doing other drugs that leave you worse off, versus just not drinking, white knuckling it, being in these places that are just so brutally, it doesn't capture it to say boring, but it's a very serious problem when you're just staring at a gray wall.
Yeah.
And you don't, you've read the books that are there, and there's no other books to be had for another couple weeks or something. And you're just playing card games or talking with your cellmate, and it's just brutal. There's no surprise you'd want to kill yourself or anything like that. So I wasn't replacing it with anything other than a desire for survival. Around that time, I wanted to, right away you start thinking about killing yourself. Everybody, I remember how common it was to at least talk about it. I don't know what the statistics are. I think, there's some statistics.
It's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised. I just know how common it was to talk about it or think about it or fantasize about it, even on the good days, because you're just kind of like bored. And dear God, the word bored doesn't capture it. It's more like hopelessness or something. So there's nothing to keep you, because even the mail back then was 3 weeks late. So even my parents writing me letters, my siblings, it'd come 3 weeks late, and like it really fucks you up. So right around then, I think also meditation is way more common than even the guys know in there. and they find ways to meditate I would consider meditation without anybody even knowing it. So meditation and loving each other, even though it's not explicitly recognized, I think a lot of inmates practice a lot of love and meditation toward each other, based just on trying to stay human, and meditation. And so at some point there, I started meditating, and I told you once about it. It was right around then at the level 4. So leaving the reception / hole, solitary confinement, entering the level 4, I met this dude that had a prison yoga book. And it was like this very nice looking book, very shiny. and it was so attractive because it looked like something to do. Fuck it. I'm not going to like make it sound like, oh, could this new yoga stuff save my life? No, it just looked like something to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you cling on to something to do in prison like you wouldn't believe. If you have a typewriter, you're just typing all the time, not because you love typewriter, because it's something to do.
Yeah.
And anything you can find that gives you something to do is going to save your life in prison. So if you have a guitar, just imagine how amazing that is. If you have paper and pencil and you start drawing, you start doing something. And so I asked him to borrow it, and he didn't want to let me borrow it because he was very protective of his property. And this guy had been in prison for a while, or at 9 years at that time. And he had said that he had held this book for such a long time, he wouldn't let anybody borrow it. But I tend to inspire confidence in people, and he let me borrow it. And he's like, I just need it back in 3 days. And I'm like, I was still new to prison. I'm thinking, what the fuck do you want this book so back, so fast for? Why do you want it back so fast? I understand it now. That was when I was first coming into prison. By the end of my prison term, I was doing the same thing to other people. But the things that you hold very valuable, you don't want to lose them, and you won't be able to get them again if you lose them in there. It'd be really hard. So, I remember going through the book and it's weird, and I get emotional thinking about how awesome it was to see those little it's going to sound weird and not significant, but the little drawings in there of what to do. You see the drawing, and then you make the pose, and then you see if you're doing it right. And then you move on to the next one, and then you put it away, and you accomplished doing something for the day, and you found something to do. And it was like, as the years would go by, it turned into something valuable that you didn't know was going to be valuable. You're just trying to find something to do. And all the guys in there, they don't have anything to do. So started with that, and after that, landed on a yard where I could actually go to a yard and jog, and I'd spend most of my days jogging endlessly. But I'll never forget that. It was funny. You get really cynical in there, and you say, "Fuck everyone." It was like, fuck Christianity, fuck God, fuck religion, fuck the politicians, fuck all the business people. fuck all the people that run everything, and fuck the historians. You would never say fuck the artists. Surprisingly, they're the only motherfuckers that are looking out for anyone everywhere. That's funny. I never thought about that. You know, if you have a book or songs or art or paintings or something or drawings, it's like they're carrying you.
Mm.
But fuck everyone else was the thought. And so I see that book, and you're on a level 4, and you can never at this point, that's 2.5 years into the whole thing. It had been nothing but hell. It was county, which is like the whole, and no yard and no fucking stimulation of any kind other than your fellow man. That's why you just love whoever you're next to. Could be a murderer, could be anybody. You fucking love them because they're the only thing you got for conversation at the end of the night. You couldn't give a shit what they're in there for, because they're the only human that's going to hold your hand and they have to sleep next to. So, it's the only person you got. It's the only thing you got is another human. And so 2.5 years into it had been nothing but hell. I was supposed to start at a level 2, Bill, if you can imagine. And because of the mistakes in the system, I ended up at the level 4, 180.
Yeah.
So brutal for 2.5 years. That by the time I got to a regular level 4 and seeing that book, although I appreciated it, I was like, fuck whoever made these books, man. They just want to do it for themselves. They want to make themselves feel good by sending these books into us. And sure, it gives us something to do, but I'm sure they didn't have any good intentions. I never see these people around, so whatever. And so I get to the level 4, and for the first time in 2.5 years, I saw people, because I landed on this other yard. People were allowed to visit us from outside, from the streets. And that's the only way I know how to say it, because your vocabulary changes once you go to prison for a while. But people from the streets, meaning just regular people that are not prisoners, were allowed to visit. And I saw them walking around the yard. At the level 4, 180, that's not going to happen.
Right.
But on the regular level 4, it's still very high. You know, you see nurses walking around the yard, and you're like, what the hell? That's weird. That's cool. I feel a little more human. But then you see someone coming in from the streets, and I was like, asked the guy next to me or someone on the yard, I was like, who are those Amish type looking folks? And they're like, oh, there's someone from the Society of Friends. Like, they were Amish type people that would visit the yard. And I was like, they're just allowed to come in here? And they were like, yeah, they run groups. And I'm like, God damn, man, I haven't seen normal people in years. And I was like, what are they in here? Would they just want to feel good about themselves visiting us? And they're like, you should go in their group, man, and go meet them. You might think differently. So I ended up getting into the group 6 months later or something, just because that's how long it takes to get into a group for self-help, right? You would imagine prisons are just full of self-help. Instead, it's just grinding you down and grinding your mental health down and making you a more violent person. And I mean that literally, because I had never fought anyone until I went into prison, and I was forced to fight. Literally forced by the gangs to fight another dude. But anyways, so I go to that group, and I just went just to look at the people. They were doing like a non-violence workshop. But I didn't care again, it's like something to do. You're doing it just to do it, but fortunately a lot of those groups, you're doing something good. And so after doing it for a long time, AVP, you probably heard of it.
Oh yeah, Alternatives to Violence program.
Yeah. After you're doing it for a while, you go, oh, I'm glad I've been doing this. There's actually value in it, when at first I just started doing it just to do something. But you're not supposed to shake people's hands from the streets in prison. And these people know that, and they would secretly come up to us and just hug us. and shake our hands and stuff. And I would ask them, why do you come in here? I didn't care about what they're teaching. I'm just like, why are you in here? Just to challenge them and get down to the fact that they're not good people. I didn't want them to come in kind of, I don't know, you're just left with this bitterness and you're just cynical. But every person I ever met that came in proved me wrong for the most part. They seem to be just as broken as us. And I think they were trying to find people like them. And I think they found more beauty hanging out with us than a lot of people they would hang out with outside of prison. They just wanted to be with people they felt like that they knew they were more like, and there was no pretension.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they could finally rest because of whatever they've been through in their own lives. So meeting you, Bill, on the level 2.
Yeah.
I was like, who's this fucker?
Yeah.
What does he want? And, meeting you after prison was just so enlightening as well. Because you probably know Brahman Curry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, okay, this person's doing something good for people in here, but I bet out there, they're just a bunch of capitalists running around making money or something. And then I get out and you guys are just probably even more beautiful out here than I thought was possible. And I was very humbled. And, it pushed back against that cynicism. So yeah, man, that's definitely the level 4 experience. There's not much going on.
Yeah.
And it keeps people in the level 4.
Yeah.
If you land on the level 4, it's more likely you're going to stay there.
Yeah.
There's no way around it.
It's self-perpetuating. It's like we say, that kind of environment layers trauma on top of trauma, and whatever might be going on, it's just reinforced in that kind of environment. And so we met on Echo Yard at Donovan State Prison, which, well, you probably know the history of Echo Yard much better than I do. Can you talk a little bit about, were you there at the very beginning?
Yeah.
Were you there when they had the big meeting and all the guys got together in the center of the yard and kind of had a moment?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that got started? Because that moment, it seems, created an environment that is unlike any other that I've heard about within any prison anywhere. And it really seems like you all got the ball rolling, and the momentum, it's moving even more and more in a direction of a healing centered environment. This is what we're looking for. Yeah. So can you tell me more about that?
So to have ended up on Echo Yard level 2, the yard you're talking about, for an inmate to have ended up at that yard would have taken an active will and effort to get there, because it was, if not the first, it was like one of the firsts of the non-designated. So earlier I talked about a yard being GP and a yard being SNY. There was nothing in between, unless you're just at the hole or something. And this yard, so a yard is made up of usually 1,000 inmates. And that yard in California state prisons is either GP or SNY. And you can go from GP to SNY. You just have to ask, like, oh, I don't feel safe on these kinds of yards anymore. And so this yard was opening, And word travels around prisons really fast. Like if something's happened, if I'm at Salinas and something's happening in Chowchilla or Pelican Bay, somehow it's just like, and the rumors start going around the yards. Oh, there's a riot over there or whatever. And so there was already rumors at the level 4 that I was at that there was a level 2 that was non-designated, and we were all laughing. We're like, oh yeah, you're going to get a bunch of GP and SNY guys going to the same yard where everybody's going to be stabbing each other. We're like, that's not going to work, because that's the whole reason they're separated. And now they want to make something called non-designated where both people can go there if they want. So the level 4 had turned into a level 3. And by that time I was ready to go to a level 2. And I asked to go to that yard because it was in San Diego. And that's where my parents live. And everybody on the yard, I was like one of 2 dudes that wanted to go there. Nobody wanted to go to RJD, by the way, Bill.
Yeah.
When we got there, it was empty. It was half full. It was like a weird little desert town.
Yeah.
For about a year before it started getting more people. And everybody on the yard was telling me I was going to get stabbed the day I got there. So as you can imagine, anybody that went there already knew that there was a potential for violence getting there. But I think what ended up happening was that ended up, and we spoke about this last time, that ended up filtering out all the people that wouldn't have wanted to go. And it would have only left people that were very serious so serious, willing to risk like having to keep an eye out so you won't get stabbed, which is common. That's why I keep saying stabbed.
Yeah.
Stabbings are common in prison because that could just mean stab with a spoon, stab with a pen, stab with a pencil, stab with a knife. It's not always lethal. So it's just very common. Mm-hmm. And you could get stabbed really hard with, a sharp pen, just enough to get you off the yard is what people are trying to do if they're stabbing you. They want you to go run to the cop and say, I need to leave this yard.
Yeah.
If they're trying to kill you, they'll stab you with a knife, but that's not as common. So that's who ended up at RJD, were people that were at a yard telling their friends, I'm going to RJD, man. They said they're going to have puppies. They said they're going to have,
Yeah, there was a pitch, right?
Yeah, there was a pitch, and there was a very strong pitch because there's something called like a San Quentin newspaper that they print at Quentin prison, and they distribute that newspaper to every prison in California. There's like 30 some prisons they print out, and in the back of the latest issue, it's like a monthly thing, was an ad for all prisoners to, hey, come to this new, it's honor yard. So you have to be having had good behavior for a year or so. There's going to be puppies. I mean, this sounded absurd. And they're like, they think we're stupid. Puppies, like you'll be able to have a puppy in your cell. I'm like, what the fuck are they talking about? Puppies, music rooms, and I was talking to my brother about this, but they were going to have baseball gear with a bat, like a metal bat. And I'm like, they expect us to believe they're going to let us have a bat on the yard. I'm like, that's a good idea. Bunch of stuff like that, brand new facilities, open day room all the time, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I don't care if all of those things are a lie. I don't even care if I might get stabbed, but I need to be close to home.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to see who ends up on this yard. So we all end up on that yard, Bill. And, that was the agreement. There was a lot of GP and SNY guys there. And at the end of the day, I think guys at level 4s, I think guys on death row, I think guys at level 3s, I think GP guys and SNY guys all want to find a way to not have to fight and have a peaceful time before they can just go home.
Yeah.
And the only thing that gets in the way is peer pressure and ego. And so, if you're GP and you're a gang member and they force you on a yard like a level 2 Donovan E yard, and you didn't ask to be there, because, there might be some guys with certain crimes that you don't want to be around. You'll go fight them and you'll get off that yard.
Right.
All based, and those guys want to go home just as much as the next person, but the peer pressure and the ego won't let people, behave in a way they want to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so when we got there was constant conversations about, everybody was looking around, like, is something going to happen, or are we safe? And that's why there were those meetings, especially some of the guys that got there early. I don't know if you ever met Abdullah or I forget his real name, but Dempsey and
Dempsey,
Vaughn, and Shaky, Westcott, and all those guys were very vocal and very, very there early, and just ready to try to have conversations to try to make the yard work instead of having it devolve into another SNY or GP yard. And so there was constant conversations and heated ones, but you could see the desperation of people thinking there might actually be a yard that could work that's like this. And it was always teetering in the early days, and there was some fights where guys would get shipped there that didn't ask to be there. That's a stupid thing about many stupid things about the prison system in California, but one of them was that if you didn't ask to go there and you actively said, don't send me there,
they'd send you
and they'd send you anyway. It's like, well, this is an honor yard, why don't you just get all the guys that want to be here? And many times it's because they thought they were going to get stabbed. And so who shows you how rational I am, but who would go to a yard if they think they're going to get stabbed?
Yeah.
But it ended up working out because there was a desperation to keep that. And there were puppies there.
Yeah.
That was weird.
They made good on that. Yeah. That, I remember I think we started up our yoga program maybe 6 months or a year after Echo Yard opened. And, I remember, this was, one of the first non-designated yards. And we were hearing stories about the non-designated facilities and like all of the problems that they were having in other prisons throughout the state with the non-designated yards, where it was just it wasn't working. Let's just put it that way. Right. And Donovan was different. The E yard on Donovan, and it really just, it impresses me. And like I said, we started going back in about 8 weeks ago after the COVID pause. And so, now, the mural, talk about the gray concrete, right? And like how
Menendez brothers still painting it.
Yep. And I think it's Lyle. I can picture him standing up on some scaffolding, working on one of the things.
Right. Bishop,
But it's the whole curtain, except for the housing units, not the housing units yet. But
but it's a massive wall.
Is the walls are coming to life, and beautiful work. Right. Really beautiful work, not art, well done.
Right.
And it was, and so you go in there now, and a couple of the guys, I saw Shaky, by the way, a couple weeks ago or last week or whatever it was. And we were talking about that, as a matter of fact, I'm going to tell this story again, because what you say. So when I first met him, Scott, on Bravo Yard, was the very first time that I ever went into a facility. I went in with the Buddhist group and a guy named Pete Kuhn. We went in there, and he, after the Buddhist services, I remember there was an older guy in a wheelchair. And Scott just says to him as we're falling out of the room, you don't want to lift. And the guy says, sure. And Scott takes his stack of folders, which was his D&D gaming. stuff, right? You got to have
Yeah.
sets it down in the older guy's lap and then starts wheeling him back towards the housing unit. And so my coming off of that yard, and of course, all the stuff and all the misconceptions are going through my head going in there, not knowing what to expect. And the impression that it leaves me with, I'm looking back over my shoulder at Scott, pushing this guy along and bending over to talk to him and realizing I'm like, there's more compassion and more care for one another here than I see on the outside. And this is my first impression of what the environment is in prison. And also underneath that, though, there's a sense of there's like a tension. You can feel the tension that something could happen at any moment. But at the same time, there's this compassion and this kindness and caring for one another that is, I think, essential in humanity. It's an expression of an essential feature of who we are as humans. We need other people in our lives that we love and that we know love us. And that is going to happen, even if everything about the system feels like it's trying to work against that. Like, I know I've talked to guys that will say, I was good friends with my cellie. And then, of course, they can transport you at a moment's notice, and you get a note and 2 days later you're gone and you've lost contact with somebody that's your friend for years, maybe. Yeah. And that heartbreak, how is that not another brick in the wall? And it's just like, it's frustrating to feel like, and I guess what's frustrating for me, and, so I met you in the context of Donovan. And I remember the talent show that y'all had very early on. And of course, everybody is playing either classic rock or hip hop. And then you get up on stage and you're playing like my kind of music. You're playing indie pop stuff, right? It was just, I don't know, that whole, I miss those big events. I hope we get back to doing some more stuff like that, but just to see the difference. Oh, so they have a fitness studio. They've turned one of the multi-purpose rooms in one of the housing units into a fitness studio.
Oh, sweet.
Alex Acuna, Pablo Hernandez, a guy named Ryan Mickey, Kevin Driscoll, I think, is in on it.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, all of those guys, and they teach. Ryan's a personal trainer. He might have come after you left. He's certified personal trainer, and so they go in there and they do nutrition and fitness and yoga and Tai Chi, and but it's known among all of the officers there because they understand that need to get that energy out, and doing it in a way that they're not hurting anybody. They're not hurting each other. So it's like this, and they're taking attendance and they're doing pre-post surveys for when people get involved, and they're running groups. The guys that are not in EOP, and EOP, is extended outpatient. They're people with mental health issues. The guys that are in there that are not EOP, running groups for folks in the EOP program. It is a phenomenon. And I think yeah. So anyway, I guess I want to hear a little bit more, because this sounds like, how long were you on ER?
3 years.
3 years. So 3 years in hell and 3 years in a different kind. I mean, I don't want to say that it's still prison.
And it's still prison, but I think it's a little relative, because county was hell. And then I get to a level 4, 180, and it seemed like heaven compared to county. The cops at county, I think they're part of the sheriff's department in a county jail. I think they're technically part of the sheriff's department. They won't let you take a step without yelling at you and acting like you're about to kill someone or something, which only inspires you to more violence. But You
Mm-hmm.
take a step in county jail. Hey, motherfucker, did I say you could walk, get your hands behind your back and blah, blah, blah.
Interesting.
And then you get to a level 4, 180 and you walk behind a cop and you say something like walking, like, because you're always supposed to announce that you're walking for the safety of the cops. And if you don't do that, the cops will get mad at you. Like, hey, you didn't say walking and you're walking behind me. They didn't do that anymore. Cops in state prisons, correctional officers are way different. So that tiny difference there, Bill, to me was heaven. It was like, this is so cool that I can
move around.
Yeah, this is so cool. I thought it was like so rad that I could just walk behind a cop and not have to worry about him yelling, chewing me out. They were just very laid back in that way, right? But it was a level 4 correctional officer, so he was only so laid back. And then getting to that level 3, which was like a level 4, felt like heaven, because now the biggest difference between level 4s and level 3s is more yard and slightly less cops being, as actively watchful. And that's a heavy thing. It's hard to explain, but there's just more cops on the yards. And then going from the level 3 to the Donovan yard, to your point, it felt like paradise. Everybody that would get there were like, dude, the doors are always open, meaning you could go back into your housing unit and back to the yard anytime you want. That's just not normal, even on a level 3. They close the doors and you have to wait 45 minutes if you go to the yard to work out. To go back in, you can't just go in. We're like, dude, you can just go in and out. You can use the phone whenever you want. The cops barely looking at you. You don't have to have any interaction with them. It's a big yard. There's barely one cop over there. And all of this started inspiring less hostility within you, because you're just granted this trust and responsibility to, hey, you're on the level 2. We don't have to keep an eye on you. That shouldn't, I don't think, be a privilege, but that's what it was. You had to work for that, to be allowed to be entrusted with humanity. And I think if they would do that even on the level 4s, things would cool down a bit. Because to be honest with you, I was there. I'm on the level 4s. You still have to look for the trouble. You still have to be doing drugs and getting into debt and gangbanging in order to be a part of that. Or for the most part, you are going to be left alone. And yet the cops will treat everyone exactly the same, as if you're looking to stab someone. And when you're not, and you're just like, Jesus Christ, now I really do want to stab someone. So you're at this level 2. And I think it was a weird, maybe it was luck or something, or maybe the leadership there really worked hard. That I won't know anything about, because it's some more, administrative CDCR personnel staff, whether it was the warden at the time or the captains. But what seemed to have happened that inspired a lot of the peace and goodwill that the inmates were showing towards each other and the institution was that the cops were staying out of the way. There were people that were hired that were the common workers there that were so chill. Like Roberson was a cop there. He could be extremely bad news to some people, but probably to 90% of the inmates, he didn't even see you. And that's awesome. When a cop doesn't see you is awesome. He's just doing his work. He doesn't notice you walk by, instead of like fucking watching out. Then there was a lady named Bird. She was amazing. And they were the normal staff, and they seemed to just be for the inmates, the original staff. They wanted to be friends with you. See, that's the other thing, Bill. At all the other yards, they're not your fucking friends. It's a war. And when I first got to state prison, they start yelling at you, blah, blah, blah. This is what the name of the game is here, blah, blah, blah. And Roberson and these people would be like, hey, Castro, what'd you think of that one movie, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why is this guy talking to me about what? And I'm like, this movie's good, man. I'm going to keep walking away from you. What the fuck? But as the years went on, he became a friend. And I'm like, I could just, hey, Roberson, did you see this and that? And he's a buddy. Um, I remember he did something very bad to George. I don't know if you ever met George Jorge, I forget his last name, but he ended up going to the hole. Stabbed somebody there recently. I don't know if you heard about it, but Roberson was picking on him one day. It was not cool. But anyways, so staff that they had picked seemed to have been a good choice, or they were trained to be like, hey, this level 2, you're supposed to be friends, or I saw that documentary about the prisons in Norway. It's like they treat you that way more commonly, like just a human. And so that was a huge thing. The fact that they didn't lie and they gave endless groups. So groups, I know what they are, but me just saying groups probably doesn't capture what it is. And you know what it is. In prisons, you have to sign up for groups, and groups can be anything from AA to yoga to music groups, writing groups, meditation groups, prayer groups, church groups. At a normal yard, you might have 3 or 4 groups. At RJD, they were telling us there would be 20 groups, and you could pick all of them or some of them, and it won't take long to get into them. And that was true. So, I mean, for the most part, it's true. I know your guys'
3-year wait list.
Yeah. So they delivered on a lot of the stuff. And I know I keep bringing up the puppies as if it's a funny thing, but just imagine how unreal that is, going from a level 4 to a level 2. And there's little puppies and no one's in charge of it other than an inmate in the cell. Yeah. And you're like, this sounds so silly, but it makes you human, and it makes you feel like entrusted, and it really goes a long way to not wanting to hurt anybody. And I think the capitalism out here is a big thing, that is the kind of capitalism in America that stops people from doing so much in their lives and progressing, that of course they feel like they're stuck and they got no freedom and they're not human, and they're going to react a certain way within that structure of, okay, now I got to sell drugs. Like, I'm just being grinded down, at this certain job that I don't want. And so it's the same in there, meaning they tried to, and I think succeeded in taking away a lot of the things that were making things not work on different yards, whether they were GP or SNY. And that was the way cops behave. That was delivering on the promises of groups. That was keeping, the thing I said in the beginning of, there's something to do. Like, give people something to do, or they're going to do something else. And because you're staring at a gray wall, that thing they want to do is either drugs or fighting or something that, lashing out at the universe and everything else. So they gave us so much to do, and there was a bat there, and I would see people playing baseball, and I'm like, there's a bat on the yard. Like, awesome. There's guitars, there's music groups, there's normal people walking around, like, from the streets. And I would say that's what contributed the most to the success of E-Yard, and how, they have a lot of stuff for people to do. They're not pushing their buttons by closing the doors and not letting them go outside. They have yard as often as possible, even when there's, when the yard goes down. Something in prison is, if the yard goes down, that means everybody has to go back to their cells. That's very common on level 4s and level 3s. But every time, this was awesome, by the way, at RJD, when the yard would go down, I was like, okay, fuck, it's 10 a.m. That means yard's burnt for the day. No, it would be 30 minutes, and then they would open the doors. We're like, what the fuck? They opened the yard again. They're like, really? I thought it was yard down. I was like, yeah, but it was just down for 30 minutes. I was like, damn, they opened it again. This place is heaven. And by the way, I ended up on the level 1, and the level 1, I couldn't even find a cop if I was looking for one. And so that was one of the most pleasant experiences. And so that's the other thing you mentioned, that these days, like you said, there was like 200 guys out there and you couldn't even see a cop. Because of the politics and the stuff that's already the standing relationships that there are on a level 4, you are correct in saying that would be a problem on a level 4. But if you had these same exact guys without the standing, problems, you could do the same thing. But since on the level 4, there's already standing rivalries, there's standing debts and drugs and drug trade and corrupt cops and expectations and peer pressure. But I wouldn't say that it's the guys themselves. It's the structure they're in. So you could have put all those same guys on the level 4 on the level 2. And as long as they didn't know each other and knew the standing politics of where they came from, I think it'd be the same thing. There wouldn't be a reason necessarily to start punching each other or stabbing each other. It'd be like, oh, this feels really good.
I think this, but what I always say is when you take away, and with the yoga practice, it's like we're managing activity in our amygdala and in our brainstem, and we're in a calm and relaxed state. We're awake and aware of what's going on around us. And in that state, we naturally move towards the impulse to connect and cooperate and take care of one another, because that is our ultimate, short-term survival, fight or flight. That is a last resort for survival. That's when you're feeling like stakes are high. But our long-term survival is built around cooperation and, compassion and loving one another.
And they lead to the things we want the most at the end of the day: peace, love, friendship, all those fuckers at the level 4. They want friends.
Yeah. Okay, Danny, we're chewing up the time. I feel like you and I could go on for another hour or more, and we might have to get back together and do this again. But Priscilla's reminded us that we want to open up for some Q&A, and I want to invite Priscilla back in. And just, Priscilla, do you have, God, Danny, thank you so much for...
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chris. And thanks for everything you guys are doing.
Yeah.
And thanks for your patience on behalf of a lot of the inmates, because seeing y'all go into the prisons is at once unbelievable. And I'm sure you've met so many of us that come up to you and ask why you do this, why you waste your time with us, unwanted, the outcasted, and you have your answers. And I did ask you that, by the way.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for everything you guys do. And I know a lot of times it's going to come without much gratefulness or gratitude because of the cynicism that's built in. And you guys keep going in there, even though there's some tough, including mine, some tough personalities that don't believe you and we want our time off. Did you log my hours? And they'll bug you and bug you and bug you. And they don't believe you. And they don't. And I can't wait for everybody to meet you outside and see how real you guys are out here.
Yeah.
But thank you for what you're doing. Yeah. And it was extremely unbelievable to me when I would see people like you go in. Like, you can't believe how unbelievable I thought it was. I was like, what?
Why would you come? Why would anyone come here? Want to be in this place? Yeah. Well, I think you capture it when you say that, the folks on the street are sometimes much more broken than the people that you knew inside. Yeah. And this is the thing. And especially when I get into, our groups are all volunteer. So these are folks that are self-selecting into a yoga program.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm meeting some of the best people on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm there. I have to give a speech. The speech is about, my anger management problem, and the harm that I caused through all of that. And, and I was telling the guys about it a week or two ago, and they're like, I had the mantra, God doesn't love me. I'm an awful person and I'm a fuck up and I don't belong here on this earth. And, folks in the circle are like, yeah, me too, and moving past that is the thing. And that change that you ultimately realize, there are other people are good and maybe I'm good too.
Sure.
Priscilla, thanks. I want to open it up. Do you have any reflections or questions that you have? And then we'll also, can you hang out for a little bit longer, Danny?
Yeah.
Let's open it up for some Q&A. And I think we'll just have folks drop questions into the Q&A box, and let me bring that up. But turn it over to Priscilla for a little bit here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Such a beautiful discussion. Yeah, if you have questions, there is the Q&A button towards the bottom. You can go ahead and honoring time if you need to drop off, we understand. Something that through listening, I remembered because I remember being a kid and there was always someone in the family that was in prison, uncles, cousins. So that was something that just was there, like nothing I really thought about. It's like, yes, some relatives in prison, like that's super normal. And then just something else when Danny was talking about how, like, if you have a typewriter, you type, not because you love typing, just because you have one. We have an uncle that would send me really beautiful drawings, Tio Martin, Dan. Super beautiful drawings, such a great artist. And then once he got out, I was like, are you still drawing? He's like, no. That was just to kill time. But like his art was incredible, detailed, so talented. But yeah, I think like just always in my mind, there's a cousin or an uncle, maybe gang related or something. They're always in prison. And it didn't really hit me until Danny went in that it just became more real or more, it affected me more. And of course, he went in when I was much older. So now, I wasn't just a kid being told, oh, so-and-so's in prison. Okay. Just like a passing thought. And then, Danny is actually how I got connected with PYP because, a couple of years ago, I started getting more into like activism and I thought about the prison population is a population that to me didn't get a lot of attention for care. There's tons of homeless outreach groups and all this other stuff. And I, asked Danny, or Danny connected me to Rob Bird on Facebook. And I asked him if he knew of any, volunteer options for folks coming out. I had been doing a lot of homeless outreach with food and clothing and stuff. And so then Rob told me, hey, my friend Bill is looking for an administrator for Prison Yoga Project. And I was like, a job? I'm on that good unemployment right now. I don't know if I want like a real job right now. But then, I looked Prison Yoga Project up and I was like, this is the work I want to do. And it's a job that I can like do and support. And just, all the stories, and I'll chat with Danny and just ask him about certain lingo, like scary, my boy, just like, stuff like that. So this is great.
Danny, we didn't get a chance to talk really about what you're doing now, which is, I follow you on Instagram and you're up to some really cool stuff. So what's it been like? And I guess coming out, and then you made a connection inside that has really paid off for you.
Yeah. So again, at RJD, there was they allowed some filmmakers to go in there, and they were filming something for Netflix, some kind of documentary on inmates that write songs and play guitar in prison. And I had signed up for that because that's what I was doing. And when they got there, a little camera crew, a director, a producer, and some engineers and stuff recording us playing music. I saw this guy wearing all black standing out in back. And I'm always like, who's that person? I'm going to go talk to them. And he's like, oh, I'm a producer. I'm the producer of this thing. And I was like, well, you look like a producer. You look all mysterious over here and back. And I told him this was 2 years before I got out. I said, well, hey, I've always liked writing screenplays. I'd love to like send you an email when I get out. He's like, yeah, for sure. So he gives me his email. And just like all of us that were in prison, we have our little notebook of contacts and plans for when we get out. So I get out And I applied to some film schools, and I've only been out for about two years. And so last summer, I got into this film school in LA, and I was like, oh yeah, there's that guy. And so I emailed him and I said, hey man, I'm starting film school in the fall last year, and I was wondering if we could meet up for coffee and maybe I could intern, whatever you're doing. I have no idea what you're doing. So he writes me back, and we have coffee in LA, and it was weird to see him. I was like, whoa, this is cool, man. I didn't know him at all, other than just seeing him in prison, this producer guy. And he offers me a job as a PA on this set and I didn't, know what it was going to be like. I'd never been on a set. I just want to write screenplays and see a movie get made, I guess. And I go on set, and there's just big actors, I'm like, what the heck? This is a real movie. It's like a big production. And I loved it so much that I told them, and PA job is really hard. You're just running around, sweating and picking up chairs, and you're just the person doing
labor,
work on a film set.
Yeah.
And I said, hey man, I love it. He's like, oh, cool. You did a great job. And I was like, what would be the next step? And he trusted me right away with a position called production coordinator, which is kind of like the person in the office of a production, like of a movie, who's handling every email between the agents, managers, production, crews, vendors to make a movie. And I loved that. And that was last fall. And then they moved me up to assistant producer with them. And it's a company called Traction Pictures. And they just finished an Orlando Bloom movie that they were the main producers on.
Wow.
They ended up being really big deal producers. I had no clue. And I just ended up somehow befriending them, probably because I was so clueless as to who they were. I just thought it was, I met you in prison. What's up, doc? And so they liked that about me, that I wasn't like somebody trying to schmooze up to them. And then I ended up directing my own movie with them producing it this last June. And now I'm, working on more movies with them in that role, which is kind of crazy.
2 years.
In 2 years, I was like, hey, I didn't know it was so easy to make.
Quite a career arc.
Yeah.
Quite a career arc.
All you have to do is go to prison, meet some producers.
No, what you got to do is I think there you go. I mean, it's like you're a regular person treating them like regular people.
Yeah.
Not trying to get something out of them. And so, meeting them in a human way.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Adam, and Adam's wondering, have you come back to your faith or religion since finding your sobriety? And if so, did you do this through a program like AA?
I'm that philosopher wannabe, with the education in prison was awesome. I was doing this master's degree. I'd be carrying around stacks of books because there's no internet in there, and I'm just running around, and everybody knew me as the guy always running around with stacks of books trying to get a master's done. And nobody would believe me. They're like, you're not going to finish it. They're not going to give you the 6 months off. Everybody's so cynical in there. I did finish it. I did get 6 months off my prison sentence. And so to Adam's question, I tried to leave more than anything. I think when I was in the hole and getting sober in the beginning, I really was done with any kind of religion or Jesus and Christianity, but I knew I had to have reasons, right? I didn't just want to leave based on my own hatred of God, the idea of God and Jesus. I wanted to leave with good reasons. And I don't think Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and other folks like Mother Teresa and stuff would let me leave that easy, right? Mm. So I was like, all right, because these people are so beautiful and so suffering, and they connected. I mean, what am I going to try to sell the idea of MLK Jr. on people? He's like a god, he's so rad, Gandhi and everything. So I was like, okay, I won't like outright leave the philosophy of it, but I'm definitely done with the organized religion part of it. And I was keeping in touch with these philosophers in there from Rutgers, from Stanford. I was a letter writer, so I would write letters to the most famous philosophers that are alive still, right? The guys that are carrying the torch for Plato and company. Some of them are atheists and some of them are theists. And I was just keeping in touch with all of them through the education process of the masters, but also for my own curiosity. And I came to the conclusion that I can't accept that the human consciousness is the ultimate consciousness. That's about as far as I can get as far as religion goes. I think historically, there's something about Jesus as a person historically, and maybe some mysterious stuff surrounding that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think he was very explicit about what was going on. And then I kind of glossed over my physics background.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a little more extensive than I made it sound. That was what I focused on. And consciousness, which includes a lot of neuroscience.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still just a lot of mystery. And so, especially when you get down to, I don't know if Adam is interested in this, but when you get to the quantum level, time doesn't even behave the way we think that it does. And there's something called backward causation that has been, it looks like it's happening, which is something that hasn't happened yet is affecting the thing that's going to make it happen. And that's like, wait, what? So time doesn't even behave the way gravity and all these things. And there's no answers yet. Like you can go literally to MIT, to Sean Carroll. These are some really big, famous physicist dudes, atheist dudes that will tell you that it seems like there's consciousness. They call it panpsychism. It sounds like a non-scientific term, but it's science and philosophy, where consciousness might be widespread throughout the environment, including at the quantum level, such that something like Schrodinger's cat can't be explained unless there was consciousness even within inanimate objects.
Mm-hmm.
That's coming from a straight scientist at MIT, doesn't believe in God. And then they ask him, what? And then he's like, we just don't know. So I wouldn't be surprised if something like God exists. I just don't think the definition of what we would give it would be adequate. So it's definitely not the definition that most Christians use, I think. But it would be something more like the Eastern Oriental mystics or Buddhists or certain Eastern Orthodox Christians talk about God in this way. No problem with that, but it'd have to be rooted in love. There's just too much weird stuff going on with Western Christianity that's kind of silly. So I'm not against it. I tend to believe in the more mysterious. So if one would call that God, then that's cool. Or big aliens.
In your statement, the last line, I now spend my time making movies, studying philosophy, and praying to God, also known as making music.
Yes.
And I think that, I don't know if there's a living experience of being in a state, I think this is me speaking, being in a state of connected to, state of connection to the universe and loving everybody that you meet, regardless of, and that feels more like the practice of Christianity to me, as well as the practice of Buddhism and the practice of Islam as I've understood it. And so, it's being Christian. It's kind of like it's sort of a similar thing as to say, it's like, oh, well, I practice yoga. That requires further explanation.
Right.
I
just wouldn't be surprised if like Jesus came back and said, I am God and I'm like the most loving person you'll ever meet. I'd be like, sweet. I'm not surprised if it's all rooted in love and the stuff that Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. talked about.
Yeah.
And I'd be stoked if there was something that connected us. In that statement, I also talk about the reconciliation of pains and sufferings. I would just hate the thought that, at the end of the day in the universe, this stuff doesn't get resolved for the people that suffered way more than I did. I would love the answers at the end of the day that, would ultimately hopefully be rooted in community, forgiveness, love, and some sort of great thing like that. And, if there is a God, then we're all okay, no matter what we believe. It's just silly to think that it's this vindictive person up there going, do you believe in me?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, you're fucked now. Next.
Yeah. God is not swiping right or swiping left on us.
Yeah.
I don't know which direction God's swiping.
I wouldn't be surprised, but music to me is so awesomely mysterious. It saved my life. I was, even before prison and even now when I wake up pretty depressed almost every day. It takes me about 3 hours to snap out of it. And I'll put a song on and I'm good. And I'm like, I can pray to music. I don't know what music is, but even sound at the quantum level is a thing. And I'm just like, what is sound? And then when it's put in a certain way for our little human brains and our little consciousness, our little localized consciousnesses, it's so awesome and so healing and so lovely. And I'm like, that's all I need. And whatever, man, I just need people around me that love me, and I want to love them back and help each other get better and feel better and be cured of like all the traumas. And just like you said, that sounds way more Christian than like asking people if they're Christian or if they'd like to be. It's like, I'm just going to go around as much as I can, making people feel less alone. And if you're doing that, you're in a good place, no matter what you are.
Yeah. We should probably go ahead and wrap up.
Thanks, Adam.
Have you read the book, Quantum Paradigm?
I don't think so. Who wrote it?
It's science journalism, but it talks about this, and it really had a huge, profound impact on my. We'll talk. We should get together for coffee sometime soon.
I'm down.
Yeah, I'd love to hang out and just chat some more. And well, before we go ahead and sign off, any last thoughts that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I do want to say that I never knew how important thoughts could be for those in prison. It's we have these, our thoughts are with you, we're sending good vibes. But after meeting people that actually came in and visited us, I'd be sitting in my cell and I would think, those Amish people came in, or Bill came in, and I would, we think about you guys a lot, and we talk a lot about the people that visit us. That's all there is to do, is talk about what's happening on the yard. And I would meditate on, there's people thinking about me, and there's people hoping for me, whether it's my mom or Chris or my siblings and my dad. And I'd go, okay, cool. Let's not forget that, because it's really easy for prisoners to think they're alone. Very, very big problem. I would get off the payphone with my parents, and as soon as I hung up, click, I would have these crazy thoughts of, I'm the most forgotten person in the universe. So I would sit there and I'd meditate and I'd go, Bill came in, he's thinking about me. The Amish people came in, they're thinking about me. And this would help me go to sleep. But then one day I got really suicidal, right? And I was sitting in this cell and I wanted to smash my head. And I was feeling the concrete on the walls to see how strong, like if there was any give to it. And I was hoping there wasn't, and there wasn't. It was very strong. And I wanted to just, I was kind of hitting it a little bit to see what the feeling would be, because I couldn't stand consciousness in that moment. I was very alone. I just didn't want to be awake. I didn't necessarily want to kill myself, but I just didn't want to be awake ever again. And so I sat down for a moment. I'm holding my hands, and I thought, I'm going to think about some people because people think about me, and I'm thinking, okay, they're thinking about me, I'm okay. But then I turned it around and I was like, why am I not thinking about others? I'm over here enjoying the fact that my parents are thinking about me. Okay, I'm okay. And then I was like, okay, before I smash my head, let me just think about all the people that would need some thinking about them. And I just sat there, and this image could have been made up, right? I'm just thinking about, okay, what about who's the most suffering person in the history of the world? And I remembered this story about the Jewish people were under siege. There was some history book back in the Crusade days, right? Long time, like the year 300 or something. The Romans are just putting a siege around the city. It was a history book. And they were starving all the Jewish people within, Jerusalem or something, to the point where there was just no food, no water. People were just starving and stuff, or just in certain quarters of the city. And even the Roman soldiers were starving. So everybody's starving, even the people laying the siege. And I had just recently read that book. And I'm sitting there, and there was a story in there about a lady who had cooked her own child. The child had died. Her baby had died. And so she cooked it in order to create a smell of good food. And some Romans came by, and they were like, oh, this person has food. They were holding out. And they came in and they saw that it was a baby, the dead baby. And the lady, I'm sure, had lost her mind at that point. And I don't know if she was trying to fool them or if she was going to eat the baby or what. And the Romans were freaked out and they left. And this was like one of the only historians back then. It's this guy named Josephus, Jewish scholar. And that story popped into my head, and all I told myself was, across time, nobody even knows how time works, right? Like we're talking about quantum mechanics, time goes backwards sometimes. I just thought of her, and I was like, before I smash my head to get out of consciousness, I just want to let you know I'm with you. And I just thought about her, and I was like, I'm suffering right now. I don't feel good. You didn't feel good. And even though I'm way in the future, I'm with you. Just want to let you know. And all my loneliness and depression went away. And I was like, whoa, that's so weird. And I felt not alone. I didn't feel alone anymore. And I was like, man, I wish she somehow knew that I'm thinking about her. And maybe it's possible, who knows? But it's for us to think about the inmates, and they appreciate it.
Yeah.
But sometimes we can think about them, and it does a lot for us. Thanks, Bill. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Danny. Danny, I believe she knows you're thinking about her, and I believe that she is thinking about you. Yeah, I feel that so strongly right now. Yeah, it's been such a joy to spend a little bit more time with you, and thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Chris.
Normally we plug stuff, but this feels so profound. I want to leave it in the profound. And yeah, I am thinking about you, and I'm thinking about all the guys in my program and all the guys not in my program and all the guys in all the prisons and jails, all the men and women, all the youth, and then all the other people, right?
Yeah.
Suffering, but they're not alone. Right. As long as we're having them in our minds and in our hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We're going to leave
Love
it.
you guys.
Yeah. Love you too.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
I'm going to the kitchen and want to hang out.
All right. Thanks again for doing it. I'm going to log off. Love you guys.
Yeah.
Have a great day, and thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
All right. See ya.
Thanks, Priscilla.